Chris, welcome to the Live and Learn Video Arts podcast.
Great to be here.
Very excited about today's topic, which is on persuasion and influencing at work. Before we go into that good stuff, for our kind of listeners or viewers, do you want to just say a bit about your background, L&D, and how long you've worked there and who you work for?
Yeah, of course. So, I work for Octopus Electric Vehicles, which is a subsidiary of Octopus Energy, and I'm the Learning and Development Manager there. I've been there for about 2 years now, but have been in L&D officially, unofficially for the last kind of 5 or 6 years, working and training, onboarding, a lot of like leadership skills, things like that.
And I guess for people who are listening in, also quite an interesting story how we met. So you actually became a video arts client through looking for some influencing content, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. We were looking for, I guess, in the market for content that helped people understand like the importance of influence and how they can, I guess, like leverage that in their roles. Because again, influence isn't, I guess, maybe like some, I don't know, like untoward characteristic. It's more so like, I guess, giving your ideas or, you know, what you're trying to achieve legs, if that makes sense, giving it its best opportunity to flourish. And I guess in our work, we want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to share their ideas and it shouldn't be hindered by like your lack to kind of creating influence.
And learn development is a lot of it is persuasion, isn't it? And influencing and stakeholder management.
Yeah, there's a lot of influencing. There's a lot of force feeding if influence doesn't work. But yeah, it's super important in all like, I mean, all roles, but also definitely learning and development where you're trying to convince people, you're trying to influence people to do things, to develop themselves, to better themselves, to take time to sharpen the axe, so to speak. When everyone's busy doing, you know, their core role or, you know, trying to get sales, you know, making them understand the bigger picture that, you know, sometimes you need to take a bit of time for yourself and develop.
And how do you get people on that journey? You mentioned the bigger picture. Is there some things you've learned or trained to do, or some things you think you've just done naturally? Getting people to kind of come with you on something, on a journey, or sell an idea, or something maybe they don't want to do, actually.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is I guess like knowing the people that you work with in like a non-transactional way. I think you'll probably find a lot of resistance if you're just that one person who's just telling people to do stuff and trying to get people to do things, and they don't know you, they don't know who you are, what you're about. So I think importantly is to whether it be like other managers, other senior members of staff, but also engaging the people that you actually like work with day to day, or the people kind of at any level of the organization. Because again, like if you want them to buy into something, it's a lot easier, and you know you're going to have a lot easier time if you know them and they understand who you are and that you're trying to help as well. I guess it's about like the story that you're telling them, so to speak, of like, okay, hey, like you're not, I guess like the solution for me, like I'm the solution for you.
Because I remember my old mentor saying to me that influence or persuasion was kind of an exchange of favors, which I always found it quite an interesting way of looking at it. You've got a certain amount of credits. You can't always just keep asking for everybody. You've got to give something back. And managing upwards, my boss is probably watching, listening to this. If you want to manage upwards, the good thing is to learn what your boss doesn't like doing and take those tasks kind of off their plate. So it becomes a bit of a two-way street. That's kind of a form of offering a favor. Is that something you've kind of come across as well? Yeah,
100%. And I think it's all about that give and take. It's about asking like, what can I do for you? But at the same time, super interesting is the Benjamin Franklin effect, which is when someone does a favor for you, they in turn like you more or have a more favorable, I guess, opinion of you. And so that is quite, I guess, important as well, is that when you're trying to influence people, I guess a lot of that comes from like trust. And then what begets trust is like vulnerability and being like, hey, can you help me with this? And people want to feel useful.
You don't have all the answers.
People, 100%. People want to feel that they can add value to you. They're going to like you more as a result. And it's just a super important way of creating that rapport, creating that connection where there is that exchange.
Because I think we had a guest, Dr. Hazel Harrison, came on this podcast in the well-being kind of section talking about doing favors for other people or acts of kindness actually makes you feel good as well. And that is a kind of form of soft power, I think, in terms of getting people on something, showing that vulnerability, isn't it? And being authentic and kind of being a bit more vulnerable.
Yeah, I think the one person that everyone hates at the office is the person who says, that's not my job.
Yes.
And I know that...
I heard that quite, yeah. Not a video artist, of course.
Yeah, no. And I think, but you hear it all the time, but no one probably thinks that they're that person. So it's about thinking like, yes, this might not be my explicit job, but if it's going to help this person and like it's something like, you know, no skin off my back, like why wouldn't you do it? And yes, there's a line, you need to set boundaries and you need to make like manage people's expectations. But at the same time, like so much good can come from just like saying yes or offering a hand. Or taking things off people's plate because they're like, oh, they're actually really busy or they're overloaded. I'm going to do this. I know it's not my job, but like I want to be helpful. I want to be seen as helpful. And when I need it, I'm probably going to get help back in return.
Yes. And how do you think hybrid working, I'm not sure whether you had hybrid working before the pandemic, because you've been L&D 5 years, haven't you, I think? So
Yeah.
So it's probably just before the pandemic. How's that changed? And I guess some people would say it's kind of harder to influence if you're sat on a webcam on Teams or Slack or whatever. In the office, it's maybe a bit easier, isn't it? I think that's changed the dynamic a little bit.
Yeah, I think a little bit. Like I guess you have to adapt to it, and I guess you can't take for granted like those off the cuff conversations and like that easy way to build rapport in person. So I think you have to be really intentional about like creating those moments when you get to know people. So for instance, like at our work, we have a thing called Brews Day, where every Tuesday there's about 150 people in a Slack group, and they all get paired up with another person every 2 weeks. And that helps build those connections that otherwise probably would have happened in an office environment.
It's a great idea.
And even when it's across office as well. So even if there was this, even if it wasn't fully virtual or hybrid, you probably wouldn't meet people in the Brighton office or the Weybridge office, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And so it's super important for people to be able to have those conversations, because when problems arise or when things need to get done, it's hard to be, I guess, hard on the problem, not on the person, when you don't know the person. If it's just someone saying, oh, like I need this done or I need that done, if you don't know them or they don't know you, then they're going to be a lot less agreeable to like, you know, giving, I guess, like any flexibility.
Yeah. And have you got an example of kind of an L&D context of kind of influencing a project or where you started and how you went about that? Could be a project sign off, or there's some tactics I think we were preparing this episode about making things seem rare or kind of, you know, a bit scarce. Is some things you've done to get influence with people? We've talked about favors already and kind of doing networking. Is there some things you've approached a topic and how you started that project and thought they're going to be a problem to get on board and this is what I need to do to maybe get them on my side?
Yeah. So anyone who's known me for a while will probably hate this answer, but storytelling.
I'm looking forward to it. Good.
It's always comes back to storytelling, and I'll say that in twofold. I would say that there's the storytelling in the sense that it's the story that you tell yourself. In that I think Seneca was a Stoic, and he said that we dye events with our own colors, in the sense that you don't have control of the events or what's happening, but you do have control over, you know, the attitude that you come at it with, the energy that you give it, the approach that you have. So it's about framing, I guess, the problem statement in a way that, you know, puts you not as the I need something, but like I'm going to be the solution for this person or for this area. I feel like people can get kind of hung up on looking at things through the lens of this is what I need. But if you look at, okay, what do other people need and how can I bring myself to be their solution, I think you're going to have a lot more success. And then the second way of storytelling is like, what story are you telling other people as well? What are you communicating to them about like the importance of it? When people are, I guess, like coming to you with ideas or with problems, are you saying no, or are you telling a story of, hey, like actually we've tried this before, we've done something similar before, and this is why that didn't work. And I think if you become, I guess, like a blocker, people are going to try and go around you, and you're not going to have as much influence as you could have if you like, take the time to, I guess, like make sure that they understand the story that you're telling.
I love that. I think it's something I've definitely learned over the years is if you want to ask or pitch something, you often get what you put in. So if you go in quite timid and weak, you're very easy to say no to. Or if you go in too hard and kind of all about what you want out of it, that's easy to reject as well.
Yeah.
That middle ground is very hard to say no to if you have storytelling and you're positive and you're kind with it.
Yeah.
It's very hard for someone to say, I won't help you with that. Whereas if you go in really, could I please ask a favour?
Yeah.
That's very...
Definitely you've set yourself up for failure before you've even just like with your body language. You've set yourself up for failure, and I think this is probably something that like I can work on as well. In the sense that like I think so many people get by with like blustering and being able to just like convince people and saying I need this, even if they don't 100% know that they need this, or like, you know, they don't have 100% of like a business case, but they can say it with enough confidence, and they've already told themselves the story. I'm going to get this over the line. This is what I need, and they can be convincing. And I think sometimes you need to amp that up a bit yourself. Even if you're not 100% sure, I think a lot of people might second guess themselves or doubt themselves when actually they're doing themselves a disservice by not kind of going in a little bit further and kind of just like working out this, maybe the finer aspects kind of later on. But I feel like some people can maybe have a slightly incomplete picture and be like, oh, you know, be a little bit timid towards it, when actually someone with an even more incomplete picture might go in with a whole lot more confidence and get a whole lot more of what they need or what they want.
And that rapport is really important, isn't it? Because I think if you've got a rapport with somebody already, back the favours piece, when you go to ask for something, I almost feel like it's a percentage chance of getting a yes or whatever you want. You're a lot closer to 100 straight off the bat.
Yeah.
Because they like you or you've done a favour or whatever.
Yeah.
If you go in really cold and you've maybe annoyed them in the past or you've not made an effort with them, when you want something, it's you start at zero. That's the way I kind of view it as well.
Yeah, and that's what like we'd look at in like sales training as well.
Yes.
Is that, you know, you want like the ideal is to have like a warm lead, you know, someone who knows who you are, you've already had a conversation with them. Like the best way to, I guess, to encounter someone is through like a natural means. And we always try and tell our salespeople, like in the first that 30 seconds or a minute, like inject some humanity in what you're talking about, you know. Tell a story, say that you've just like dropped the kids off, say that, you know, oh, like, you know, work's busy or whatever it might be, but let them know that you're human. And I think that translates to when you're trying to sell things to people within your organization. Like they need to know you on a human level. They need to know that they're someone that they can trust the judgment of. And if they don't know you other than a few Slack messages here and there asking for things, then there's less of a foundation there for you to, I guess, like be able to build upon.
And something I've really found interesting is like insights training, or there's other providers available, by the way. That's not, we don't work with them. That's just an example. Where people have different colours, there's probably an L&D you do, it's your bread and butter. How does that impact? I mean, for me, it's quite important what type of personality somebody is. If you're going to influence them or ask for something or persuade them for something, whether they're more like a blue, they like stats, they'd like kind of time to think about something. They're red or they're yellow, they like big ideas. Is that something you kind of factor in as well? You kind of roughly know what people's styles are before you even think about how you're going to pitch this to somebody or an idea or whatever.
100%. I think you need to know the language that they speak, if that makes sense. You need
totally.
And I think you probably still want to have like a well-rounded approach, because if you focus your like entire pitch or on like this one person who likes stats, and then the next layer or like the next boss is someone who wants the story, who wants the empathy or wants the, you know, the passion, then so I think you just need to make sure that you have like a well-rounded, I guess, like a way of approaching, of a way of telling that story, or asking that favor, whatever it might be. So you need to make sure that you have some data to back up what you're saying, or you need to have some stats available. But also, like, I think you need to be able to be convincing, and sometimes stats, like, it doesn't compute with that part of the brain that helps with decision making or trust. And so I think you always need to make sure that you like legitimize it, so it's not just like a gut feeling, but also balance that with talking to people in the way that they're going to understand it.
Yeah, and whether they're risk averse or whether they like an idea or whatever it might be. And how do you find kind of pitching L&D internally? Because I think that's probably something a lot of people in this sector struggle with, maybe, is getting a voice for L&D, maybe budget, or especially for different teams, whether it's HR or even the wider business C-suite. Is that something you probably have got real life experience? You're nodding along, you're like, this is my daily job, yes.
Yeah, getting people to do stuff.
Yes.
Even if it's good stuff, even if it's fun, it's still hard to get people, I guess, like sometimes out of their shell, out of that tunnel vision of like what they're super focused on. But again, it comes back, and it's difficult, but it's like looking at the user. Yeah, starting with them. What do they want? What are their desires? What's going to add value for them? You know, when you're trying to pitch something to senior people in the business, like how is what you're trying to achieve going aligned with like the business objectives, with what the business wants to do, and then trying to like work backwards from there, essentially, because it's so easy to be like, I want to do this and that because this is going to make me feel good, and I think this would be a really cool thing to have. But if you can't tie it to, I guess, like a business objective, then it's not to say that it always has to come to that, but at the same time, it's definitely helpful. If you can look the CFO in the face with a straight face yourself and say, I want to do this, and they will go, yep, that makes sense. Like, I think you've done a pretty good job. But again, there's like a whole lot of intangibles that is just like you're going to have to rely on people's gut feeling of that makes sense, or yeah, we should do that. We want to create that kind of culture, whatever it might be. But yeah, you definitely want to think about, okay, well, what's important to them?
Yeah,
empathy at the end of the day.
that resonates with me. I mean, our CFO Claire's probably watching this. Big shout out for Claire. But yes, I think that's a good example. If you can say to the CFO and they nod along, I think you back to your point. You've got a well-rounded argument, and you've done your kind of research, your due diligence, haven't you?
Yeah, because again, like they can obviously sometimes be like the final boss as well, you know. Where it's okay, I've convinced like the
like
people, and I've convinced
the game almost, isn't it? You've got the end boss right at the end.
Yeah, I've convinced the salespeople. It's like, okay, but like, how do we make sure that this translates into something that makes sense financially?
And how do you kind of approach kind of persuasion or influencing training in an L&D context? Because I think we're talking about shared experiences here, and hopefully there's some tips people can take from it. But it can be hard to create like a tangible pathway or program on this stuff. I like the stuff you mentioned on the buddying system you have on Tuesdays. How do you kind of structure? I think management is a bit more kind of bread and butter in some ways, or leadership, or even well-being to some extent. They're tricky topics, but there's a well-trodden path in some ways of this is a typical program length, or this, we blend it or whatever. Have you got experience of how you do influencing training? Or some people get mixed up with sales, which obviously there's some crossover. What's a typical program look like? Yeah,
so I think what you need to appreciate is that it's all well and good, I guess, like teaching people the theory, and I think that's your baseline, and I feel like that's where like a lot of training can stop when you need to. So in like a lot of the sessions that I do, I will like teach someone the theory, but then I'm like, sweet, now you need to implement it like within this group. So you've practiced it at least once. And then after that, once we finish the session, I will say, sweet, now I want to see you implement this at least once or twice in like the real world and send me some proof that you've done it. And then at that point, it's their responsibility. But I feel like so often, like you'll have a training session, you'll watch a video, you'll do a module and be like, oh, that's super interesting. And then it's gone. And so what you need to do is make sure, okay, let's give it the best chance of living, the best chance of having legs. So if you're doing a module on influence, okay, sweet. I think I've been watching some video content recently, and there's the one with like start with the small number or focus on the small number. And it's like, okay, well with that, let's make sure that they know what that principle is. So let's give them a whole lot of scenarios and how they might focus on the small number in this scenario. And then perfect. Now what I want you to do is to apply this to your department, to the roles that your people do. Okay, how would you do it then? And then at the end of the session, sweet, can you guys all send me a Slack message by like the end of next week with 2 examples of you sending someone a message about focusing on the small number. You can't control, you can't be a big brother for, forever. Yep. But if you can do it at least for a week, try and get people to try and cement what they've learned and understand what they've learned and show the benefit of it, then it's probably going to give it legs. Yeah,
or my experience, we've got the dreaded role play, which is really good, but people do dread, don't they, as a default? But hundreds of hours of sales training, you kind of have to do it because it does work, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Practice makes perfect. Oh God, no! Cut that. Buh! Who says that? Rank. Get me off the podcast.
So I think we've painted a really good picture of you want to get something signed off. We've got some good tips about building kind of rapport. Some stakeholder tips and management, stuff like that. What about urgency? So you presented your case, maybe people like the idea, but they're just busy. If they like you, there's nothing kind of you can do there. How do you create that kind of urgency and kind of scarcity, or make something rare or a bit more desirable to get done now, or to your time frame, not necessarily the idea itself?
So I think it's about, again, like speaking their language. Like what do they desire? What are they looking for? They're not always going to have the same buttons that you can push for someone else as well.
Yeah, nice.
And it's also sometimes it's just hard, and sometimes you need to get maybe like their manager, involved, or their manager on side of like what's important and why you want them to do it. But like for instance, sometimes like money talks. Obviously, we talked about that, getting the CFO on side. So there was some compliance training that I wanted to get rolled out, and at that point we were paying for it. We're paying another company a copious amount of money for it, and I said to my manager at the time, look, I can do this in like 2 afternoons. And so I created the content, talked to our like compliance person, made sure it was all okay, and they were happy with it. And then for some reason there was just a process where I needed to get 12 other people to kind of sign off or get them on meetings to make sure it fit for purpose, and none of them were decision makers, and it was dragging on almost 2-3 weeks, and I just didn't know how to get through to them. They're like, I don't need these people to sign it off. And so I said, to my manager at the time. I was like, look, I've run the numbers here. Right now, we're paying about £250,000 per year on this training. So for every day that we're delaying doing this, we're losing like $2,000. So how about we try and speed this up a little bit, because I can literally have this rolled out tomorrow. And that got the ball rolling. Like, oh, actually, yeah, like it's a very low risk thing to be doing, high reward in terms of saving so much cash. But it was just like, but it was hard to find that trigger point of like, hey, like I really want to roll this out. One, for like my ego, but no one cares about my ego except for me.
Yes.
So I was like, okay, why else would someone else want this to be rolled out?
I think that's always the case of the fear of not doing something sometimes, isn't it? Is actually stronger. There's lots of studies that people, I think 95% in sales stuff, they often buy on emotion, not through facts. So a lot of people send marketing emails with here's some stats or whatever, but people buy, they're quite emotional creatures ultimately. And negative emotion is actually stronger in influencing than positive quite often, isn't it? And that's a really good example of framing that, where sounds great, happy to do it, but as soon as you said we are leaking money every day, it got done probably that day, I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
So.
And I think it's about like, communicating to that part of the brain. I think Simon Sinek talks about it in Start With Why. It's like, okay, people are making decisions based on emotions. Yeah. What emotion can I trigger? Okay, I've tried like the carrot, now I'm going to try the stick, Sometimes I really do like framing things rather than like problems as opportunities. But sometimes opportunities isn't good enough, and actually we need to say this is a risk. We're at risk of something bad happening here, because again, sometimes if you don't get that urgency or that buy-in, you need to frame it in a new way. So if you do come up against like obstacles like that, okay, you've tried it this way, now you've got to try it another way. Turn that opportunity into a risk, or vice versa.
And I think something I've always found that's worked very well and very powerful is the status quo is a risk. So a lot of people feel like, oh, I don't want to move supply, or I want to do this, or hire an extra head, or whatever it may be. But I think if you can frame, by doing nothing, this is the risk as well. Yeah,
and it's a decision as well. It's an active decision.
100%. People forget that by doing nothing, that is kind of inaction is also a decision. And that comes with risks and rewards as well. But I think a lot of people forget that, don't they? They kind of stick with what they know.
Yeah.
And actually, why wouldn't we do this? Yes, might be more work or more money, but you'll get this from it. We know this path where it goes, and then you can go back to these problems. So if we do nothing, we know where this road leads to, and it typically will get these results that we've been seeing for the last however long.
Yeah, it's like staying on a long, slow ship, if that makes sense. Like,
totally.
Oh, you could jump on the speedboat, but you're staying put. It's like, actually, by staying put, you are doing the exact same thing, and there's an opportunity cost there. There's a decision being made. Whereas you could jump on that speedboat and go with that other supplier, do whatever they want, but they think, oh, we've been going on this kind of slow trajectory this entire time, and it's fine. It's like, yeah, but like, what's the opportunity, or what's the risk? Okay, well, our competitors have jumped on the speedboat already.
And I was about to say, often that ship is by doing nothing. It's not even the same as a year ago, because the market's changed, or something's changed, or you've lost your top talent, or whatever it might be. That isn't even the same decision as it was 12 months ago. And that's, but people don't see that sometimes.
Because the world is changing.
We always wrap up the episodes with a live and learn example. Have you got an anecdote, or maybe influencing gone wrong, or you failed to persuade someone, or saw something in action that didn't quite go to plan, maybe that you'd be willing to share?
Yeah. So I guess it was a few years ago. I won't tell anyone which company it was. But essentially, I was a part of like a people team, and there was, I don't know, an event coming up. I think it was like Red Nose Day or something. And we wanted everyone to come to the office and like dress up. Nice. In red, in show of support. Classic. Or whatever it might be. And we thought it was as easy as kind of like sending out like a PDF to an email chain and being like, hey, this is what's happening. This is when it's happening. Like, bring a couple of pounds, dress up in red. But I was like relatively new to the company, and I didn't really understand the company culture. I hadn't, I guess, built up much like social credit there.
Yep.
And so people probably got an email being like, who's this guy, and why would I dress up in red? And the proof was in the pudding, in the sense that I turn up in this bright red velvet suit, and I was the only one dressed up in red in the whole company. Even the guy that had like co-written the email with me didn't dress up in red. He's like, oh, sorry, mate, I forgot. I'm like, are you kidding me? And I think that goes to show that like, when you're making like an ask of someone else, I think there needs to be some sort of credit there. You can't start large, or I guess getting people to invest like a whole lot of energy in something when you haven't, I guess, like proven your salt, if that makes sense. And so, but that's a learning opportunity in the sense that, okay, when you are trying to like create like company initiatives, when you are trying to get people to do things or get people to be involved, whatever it might be, to try and start small, build that social credit, and then once that legitimacy is there, then you can probably do the bigger ask and get people to maybe make a fool of themselves. But until you've reached that point, that threshold. And so I think the next month there was like Pancake Day, and I was like, you know what, let's just go easy. Let's just get heaps of pancakes in the office. That's the initiative. But that's starting small, getting people to eat pancakes, but like, oh, hey, we do some stuff here. Oh, and then the next time you can kind of build on that and build on that. But if you try and start with something complex and high energy early on without that rapport, without that social credit, then you can have a bad time.
It touches back to what we were saying before about you get back what you put in, isn't it? So, if you'd shared maybe you're going to go with this red suit, or took a picture before and put it in the email, or you talk in the office maybe rather than email, you probably would have got a lot more buy-in maybe than just sending a quick email. That's easier to ignore, isn't it? Easier to just kind of forget about and not do.
Yeah, 100%. But either we're winning or we're learning at the end of the day, aren't we?
Love that. That's a good place to end, Chris. Thank you ever so much for coming to the podcast. Lots of good tips to share, and really appreciate your time.
Absolute pleasure.
As always, thank you very much.